Hi there, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started in just a minute. And while you're joining, feel free to say hi. That would be awesome. And just let us know your name and where you're joining from and your favorite seasonal activity for fall, which is really funny. I'm from Louisiana and we have no fall. So my favorite seasonal fall activity is not sweating. So feel free to put yours, and then I can be very jealous of your circumstance. Again, welcome. If you're just joining, hello. Please feel free to introduce yourself and to I just saw Mitzi's in the chat and I'm laughing real time. Just tell us your favorite fall activity. Eggnog lattes. That's awesome. Great. We're going to start in about a minute. And again, if you're just joining, start typing and tell us where you're from and what your name is and your favorite fall activity. And I did just think about it, even though I have no autumn in Louisiana, we do have gumbo season. And so anytime it drops below like 90 degrees, we go crazy and we break out the gumbo pot. So that is my favorite fall activity. I want to travel north and see foliage. And welcome. Oh my gosh. Hi, Dr. Calderon. I like her a lot. She's very smart. She knows lots of things. She's also from Louisiana, which is great. All right. And of course, we're going to have people join as time goes on. This will be recorded and we're going to make sure to share everything that we've learned. If you're still coming in, please feel free to say hi, even after this slide passes, so that we can get to know who you are a little bit better. I am Kimberly Eckert, and I'm currently the head of instructional innovation and apprenticeship design at Craft Education. I'm so excited to be moderating today's conversation. And it's not just because the topic's so timely. I've actually been an educator and a leader for 17 years. And I will tell you, I started to think about it. I have never attended a school or taught at a school that's ever been fully staffed by highly qualified teachers. So the work is so timely. We're all here for such different reasons. But I bet I'm not the only one who's had that experience. So excited. We have people from all over. Our panelists are from all over. I'm going to introduce them in just a second. I will tell you first, though, that they are just incredibly visionary leaders in the apprenticeship and the K-12 education space. And they are from very different spaces within the process. So just rest assured that wherever you are in your process, we have seen it, right? And we're right there with you. And the work's so new that there is no true expertise. And so before I'm going to introduce the panelists to you, I really want to get to know you a little bit. As a teacher, I've long known that, number one, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? But more than that, we're all teachers, we're all learners. Nobody's smarter than the class brain. And like, what are my other axioms? This isn't an axiom, it's genuine. This room is now better because you're in it. And so please don't think like maybe if you're newer to apprenticeship work that you don't have amazing things to share. We're gonna have lots of questions. We're going to be asking for lots of engagement. So please don't hold back. Make sure that you're sharing everything that you know too, because that's how we're going to make everything better together. So if you see a poll pop up, just tell us, first of all, what role you play in your organization. You'll also find it's amazing to see all the different roles that bring us to the same work. So if you just take a second and you fill out that poll that just popped up, that would be awesome. All right, I'm just giving a moment so we can see. All right. Um, it's already looking like we've got a pretty wide spectrum of places and voices, and again, perspectives. And that's awesome, because in the work that I've seen, whenever it comes to apprenticeship development and growth and scaling, the more perspectives, the better. So before we dive in, we're just going to talk about um, a little quick housekeeping, and I just said it. But the big thing we want you to know, we want questions, but don't feel sad if we don't answer them right away. We are going to save time at the very end for any Q&A. So drop your questions into that box anytime. You don't have to wait for a special time to ask the question. I have awesome team members that are going to be keeping an eye on that, and we're going to answer as many as we can at the end. And with that, we're going to dive on in. I want to explore our goals for today. So today, 3 goals, a really solid, manageable 3. First, we're going to understand the why behind apprenticeship degrees and their role in solving workforce challenges. You're probably hearing a lot more about apprenticeship degrees, certainly more than you were in maybe 2021. It's new to the space, not new to the earth, not new to the world, but maybe new to your ears. And so we're definitely going to touch on why. Then we're going to learn examples, real life examples of people that have launched and scaled and sustained registered apprenticeship programs, including the funding, the program design, and everything in between. And then last, we're going to explore what makes them work and how that works. Starts with all of our stakeholders in ways that we've either never seen, or maybe we never explored the way we should in K-12 education, and maybe not in higher ed as well. So we're going to understand a little bit more about that, and then shifts in accreditation and prep models. So before we introduce the panelists, I want to know one more quick thing. It's probably not one more quick thing. One more quick thing right now, but this one's really easy. So what stage is your teacher apprenticeship program currently in? So this is super simple. You're going to just put it in the chat. And a 1 will be if you're still exploring. 2 is if you're launching or preparing to launch. 3, scaling, expanding. And then 4 would be other. Like if you just saw there was a webinar and you joined. And I love that for you, and welcome. You're going to learn awesome stuff today. That's awesome. Okay. And I'm so curious. I really want to know the other. That's cool, because my imagination is vivid. You have no idea what I'm thinking right now about why you might be here today. So thank you. And the reason why I ask, again, this is for ed prep, and I'm a teacher. We're going to differentiate. I just don't want anybody to think that they have to be an expert or that they're not welcome to learn in whatever capacity that you need. So welcome. And it's really exciting to see how many people are here at so many different parts of the journey. So thank you again. That also tells us that we're going to have really awesome chat activity, because you're not going to learn everything in the whole world from our panelists, although you'll get close, right? But make sure that you're reading the chat as well, because just again, a wealth of resources by everybody who's here. All right. So we are going to get started. And if you're exploring, you're going to see there's constant chat activity. So again, welcome to anybody who's just joined. Share your top questions in the chat. Again, we're going to take a look at the end. We do want to know if you're expanding, like your biggest success, if you have challenges, whatever it is, make sure the chat is just full of what you need it to be. So let's meet our panelists. Really, really exciting. So I'm going to share a little bit about the work that they're doing in the space. They're going to tell you a lot more once we start to really dig in. But our first guest is Dr. Liz Qualman, and she is currently the director of teacher education with Colorado Mountain Colleges. And I first met her a few years ago whenever I was working in a space where we were helping spaces sort of design their apprenticeship degree. And I don't know that I've ever seen anybody move or rally a team as beautifully or as quickly. And it's amazing to see. I can't wait every time I talk to her, because I know that more people are going to have had more access in her program. I know the passion is going to keep being there, and I know the quality will continue to be there. So she's our first guest. And again, you're going to be learning so much more from her. I also want to introduce Dr. Victoria Thiessen Homer. I met her a couple of years ago. We were on a fellowship called Deans for Impact, and I was just so amazed by her work. She is the director of the founding director actually of Arizona Teacher Residency. And we all know that in this space, anytime you're doing something, number one, that's innovative, and number two, that brings in so many people, and number three, that affects kids in such tremendous ways, that's somebody that you need to watch and be friends with. So I'm still working on bestiehood, but I'm so excited. Victoria said that she was going to join us, and she's at a different range and type of development of the program for apprenticeships as well. And I think it's amazing that you're going to get such different perspectives. I'm also going to introduce Janae. You're going to hear more about her in just a second. But what I will say, and I've probably told her this a million times and I break it every time, I promise not to embarrass you, Janae. Janae was a student at the high school that I taught in, Bruley High School, a brilliant, brilliant student. And then she became a paraprofessional at the exact same school at around the time that we worked to start a university for apprenticeship degrees. And so she was part of the very first class. And now she's joining us. She just had to ask the principal to leave because she is now working as a special education teacher in Jefferson Parish, in a very high need area. So hello, we have a real live apprentice that actually graduated and has reached amazing success. So we're going to hear from her in just a second as well. But now I'm going to introduce the person who I'm going to ask the first line of questions to, and I will also promise not to embarrass her. But Mallory Duino-Palish, she is the reason why so many of us are here, actually. She's going to tell you a lot more about her story, but she's actually who brought me specifically to this work. I told you that I was an educator for 17 years. I noticed on my own that teacher shortage was big, and it impacts kids and it impacts my colleagues and the pipeline in amazing ways that are devastating, especially in a space where I live that's incredibly rural. And so Mallory approached me with a college to be able to build, because she doesn't take no for answers. If the answer is, well, we can't solve teacher shortage, she's going to say no. Oh, we don't have apprenticeship degrees, she's going to say no. So in addition to the university that she started and invited me to be the inaugural dean and designer of, she's also created Craft. She's our president of Craft Education, and continuing to scale the work that we started together that brought to me knowing my colleagues, Victoria and Liz, and already has produced many teachers, with Janae being one of them. Hi, Mallory.
Hey, Kim, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm thoroughly embarrassed at this point, but really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you shouldn't even be. I didn't even call you goddess queen like normal. Gosh, my
Fair
best
enough.
behavior. Um, so I'm going to get straight to it. There have been so many movements so fast. I've never seen an initiative, especially not in education, take off and be embraced as quickly as registered apprenticeships. And I don't think there's a secret. You can see right here on the screen the urgency, but also the work. But there's no better person to really tell us, because you've dedicated so much of your life and your career, everything, to making sure that these programs are in place. So why are teaching apprenticeships at the university level such an important strategy for addressing teacher shortage, workforce needs, and then what opportunities do you see in launching and expanding those?
Absolutely. What a great question. And first of all, thank you everyone for being here. A little bit of background. Without dating myself, started in this space about 15 to 20 years ago. My PhD research was in rural teacher shortages. And then after that, became a classroom teacher and a principal. And like Kim, I've never worked in a school building where there hasn't been a shortage. And I think that gets to the heart of what the issue is, right? We know qualified teachers are 2 times more effective than any other tool in a school belt, like a school's tool belt arsenal, at moving the needle on student outcomes than any other tool at a school's disposal. So we should all be alarmed and scared by that 400,000 number on our screen. And that's the power of teaching apprenticeships. And it has to happen. I'll give some specifics in a second, but to start with, why apprenticeships at the university level? It can't happen anywhere else. You cannot become a teacher for very good reason without a college degree. And then, yes, a teaching credential stacked on top of that. And so, if we are serious about unlocking the power of an apprenticeship, it has to be within the teacher training programs in universities and not a separate system outside of them. And so, talking about the power of an apprenticeship, which in this case has to mean the power of an apprenticeship degree, I always think about it in three buckets. And then there are questions around them. The first one is who is becoming a teacher? The second question is where and in what, which I realize is kind of two questions, but I'm cheating. And then the third bucket is and how well, right? So let's go through each of those. Who? Right now, we all know this, the numbers bear it out, but anecdotally, I think every single person here probably has seen this in their own life. The higher education system was not structurally built to reach people in remote rural areas. It was not meant to reach people of color. It was not meant to reach first generation students or low income students. And the challenge is that is increasingly who our student population is. And so the first question that an apprenticeship degree helps answer is who is becoming a teacher and how are we making sure that the best and brightest who want to serve our students are becoming teachers and they're not being filtered out because higher ed wasn't built for them. So that's the first piece of who are we helping become a teacher that wants to be there, but that would have been screened out through some of the hurdles of traditional higher ed. The second piece is in what and where. One of the biggest problems in teaching is I can go all the way through my teaching degree and know for sure that I'm going to become an English teacher, only to graduate and find out that the districts that I want to go teach in don't have an English teacher vacancy. They have a middle school math vacancy, they have a special education vacancy, but they don't have vacancies in what I need. And most people who teach, the overwhelming majority, teach within 50 miles of where they grew up. So this idea that they're going to then go move across the country to find that English profession is not happening. So that's the second thing that's powerful about these apprenticeships is we're working with districts in real time to say not just, hey, how many teachers do we need in general, but no, what teachers do you need right now? And who are the people in your community that want to be great teachers that could fill those spots? So that's the second reason why apprenticeship has so much power to end that 400,000 number we see on our screen, is it's actually making sure at the beginning, not at the end, that we're having people trained in the subject areas in the
Mm.
locations where they're needed. And then the third and final piece is how well. Again, if we're just doing a rubber stamp and milling people through, we're not achieving the ultimate goal. That 400,000 might go down, but not in pursuit of why we care about that 400,000 in the first place, which is to move the needle on learner outcomes. Um, the thing about apprenticeships, a lot of times people will argue that they worry that it's lowering the quality of teaching. All of the early indicators argue that it's not actually like it's not just not lowering, it's actually raising the quality and the output of who's becoming a teacher. These are people who, on their first day in the classroom, look a whole lot more like a fourth or fifth year teacher than a first year teacher because they've been working in that building, getting real time daily feedback from day
Mm.
one on how to perfect their practice. And that intentionality makes sure that we're not just getting people who reflect our students in the places and the subject areas they're needed most, but who are actually showing up on day one, feeling prepared to be exceptional educators where they are. So I could clearly go on about this all day, but I just can't say enough that as we go, there are so many details in here and the nuance of like why this is hard and what needs to be done. But it's worth remembering that it's worth doing because if we take a look at what we're going after, teaching apprenticeships have the immense potential that to fill out gaps that really nothing else is filling in our ecosystem right now.
Feel like cheering embarrassingly, but I won't. I think what stands out to me the most, and thank you so much, Mallory, that the slide clearly says there's 400,000 teacher positions unfilled, and all I see are the 54 million children that are students in K-12 in America and the missed potential filling opportunities that they have. If you look at a classroom as every single child is the solution to a problem, how are we going to help them tap in and access that if we don't have a highly qualified workforce? So thank you so much for sharing that. And certainly as somebody who's coached teachers and designed a clinical program, first, I'll be the first in line to say how exciting it's been to actually watch apprentices in the classroom and then follow them the next year and honestly see that they're moving mountains very quickly because they never had to learn how to love the community. They came with that, and that's amazing. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Janae Montgomery. Janae, you know what? I don't know that I want to take any more time even setting up a question for you. You are exactly what Mallory talked about. You are a phenomenal special educator. You are a parent in a special education classroom that had very high needs in that space, and you loved it. And now you're here and you share that love in a very high need community in a place that's always been historically hard to staff in the New Orleans area. So could you tell us a little bit to you, why is this work so very important? Why is it so important?
Yes. Well, thank you for your intro. I love you forever and ever. But just to talk about my backstory, for me, the apprenticeship was the only doorway into teaching when the traditional path didn't quite fit. I think the human side is so important to just talk about because not everyone has this equal access to finish a degree in the traditional way. So I was surrounded by classmates who were older than me, who were raising families, who were working full-time jobs, and they were still finding a way to commit to teaching. For example, I had a classmate who worked nights, worked all day, but still showed up every day because she knew how much representation mattered for her students. I had another classmate who she was a paraprofessional for 20 plus years, and with this apprenticeship, she was able to transition into the classroom as a certified teacher. I had another classmate who was balancing caring for her aging parents as well as working a full time job. But the flexibility of the apprenticeship allowed for her to pursue her dream of teaching. So I just think of like stories like these that remind us that apprenticeships don't just build teachers, but they remove the barriers. And that's what it did for me. And it welcomes in people who may have otherwise kind of been locked out, and that's why exactly like this matters right now and it's so important, and it hits so home for me because I've lived through this and I've done this. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm a little teary because that's right. And you speak to the whole other piece because we could talk about the impact that it has on classrooms when you have enough highly skilled teachers, but also the lives that we're able to change by offering access to people who want to be there. They just can't overcome a lot of the hurdles that are in their place. And this allows them a way to be able to do that. So I'm going to turn it over to the chat pretty quickly, and then we're going to get straight to the meaty questions also with our panelists. But if you could in the chat, just talk about the biggest challenge. Sorry, I was reading things in the chat as well. The biggest challenge and the greatest success that you faced while preparing to launch or have already launched your program. So the biggest challenge and the greatest success. And I will say this, for some, the greatest success might be that you're here in the webinar today. So don't count any movement towards progress as a small thing. So if you could put that in the chat, always really interested to hear that. And then I'm going to turn it over. So excited. Liz, you are up. I'm so excited every time you open your mouth to speak, and now everybody gets to hear. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience launching and growing a registered apprenticeship program? So that's already pretty broad. And I would ask, did you experience any challenges? But of course you did. Of course you did, because I've watched you manage those with grace. So the bigger question is, which strategies were most helpful in helping you scale and grow? And really getting past the place where everybody's really excited, and then you find out that there's work, that it's hard work, right? And you have to sustain that. So again, tell us about your experience in launching your RAP program, and then again, strategies that were most helpful in scaling and growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I love the comments in the chats, and to answer Kim's question, I think you should probably start with kind of what kind of manager or director you are. And I like to say that I am visionary and innovative. So I sort of call myself visionative in how you might put a program like this in place. It's not like, and just so you know, I run a teacher preparation program that has 3 distinct pathways: a traditional pathway, as you would expect in ed prep, an alternative pathway, which is for individuals who already have a bachelor's degree and are doing a compacted program to get their teaching credential, and now apprenticeship as a pathway. And all of those pathways require a different type of management system and also how people interact in those pathways. So a couple of years ago, I got to have a wonderful conversation with Mallory about what about apprenticeship. And at that time, Colorado was starting to develop some legislation that was going to support the pathway with no fiscal note attached to the legislation. So that's a big boo-boo not to have funding go with a project like this. But at the same time, our governor had put together some incentive funding called Opportunity Now. We found a wonderful partner, actually two partners, with Reach University and the National Center of the Apprenticeship Degree, and then CareerWise Colorado. And so the three of us applied for a fairly large grant through Opportunity Now, which was really just for planning. So I want to make that clear because there was not any funding to put toward the actual apprentices. And so you'll hear later in this webinar how we got creative about finding funding for them. But I will say that when you're launching, you want to make sure you have really good partners. You want to make sure your vision and your outcomes are very clear, and you want to make sure that you do have funding to support that planning, because it is quite a heavy lift. It's a lift in how you manage your program. It's a lift in how your faculty develops curriculum for each of your pathways and how they look different for students. And then it also has a lot to do with just your resilience and diligence would be two words I would put together also in sticking with it, because it's not a quick implementation, but I will say that it was the pathway we were looking for. My institution is in rural Colorado, and we're an interesting rural because we have resort rural, because I'm sitting just outside of Vail, Colorado. But then we have very rural, like Rifle, Colorado, which is west of where I am. And we have 11 campuses. So we work with very small school districts who, like everyone else has mentioned so far, have unfilled teaching positions, but they do have residents in their communities who would like to be credentialed teachers, and they're already working in the schools as paraprofessionals and other support staff. So knowing that, we needed a pathway where our students could work full time, and a traditional pathway doesn't allow for that. And an alternative pathway is for individuals who already have a degree. So this was the pathway we were looking for. It's very exciting to put something like this in place, but I'll pause there for just a moment, Kim.
You could keep going forever and ever. I know that, we only have so much time, but I love to hear you speak. And it's because of that idea, like great teachers don't fall out of the sky. It takes years, and they're already there in our community. We can't keep waiting for them to just, I wonder if a great teacher is going to come in today. And I think all the work that you and your team have done just show what happens whenever you know they're there, and you just won't settle for, oh, they don't have a degree already, or, oh, they're just not traditional students. And I just really appreciate how much passion that you brought to that. I'm going to turn over to you as well, Victoria. You're in a pretty different stage, which I think is exciting, but you're no stranger to starting things that don't exist, which is also amazing in our space. So could you answer the same thing, like whenever it comes to this and where you are now, a little bit about your experience, the challenges, the success, and where you are right now with launching and scaling your registered apprenticeship program?
Absolutely. So hello, everyone. So nice to be here with you all and to learn from my colleagues who are much further ahead than I am on this journey. So I'm, as you see, the director of the first graduate teacher residency in Arizona Teacher Residency. We are a program of Northern Arizona University, and we were founded for many of the same reasons that Mallory discussed earlier about the teaching force, right? We want highly prepared teachers who can stay, and we want to lower the financial barriers to entry. And so we launched in 2022 with our first cohort, and our program is a 2-year program, and it's post-baccalaureate. And so the first year, they're an apprentice or a resident, and the second year, they are a teacher of record. And so we actually fit really neatly into our state's existing apprenticeship model, which was just officially launched. The press release went out yesterday, the Arizona Department of Education is our sponsor for our program. And we're one of the first in this pilot cohort. And I think one of the reasons we were able to transition over so well to this apprenticeship model was because the residency is really a fantastic foundation for apprenticeship. In fact, the National Center for Teacher Residencies just released a report on residency as the foundation for apprenticeship and talked about the many ways that residencies always already fulfill many of the apprenticeship requirements. So our supervising teachers are now journey workers. Our residents are now apprentices. In the first year, they have 1,000 hours of required direct service, which they already had. In the second year, another 1,000 hours. The pay bump is natural. They go from resident to teacher of record. We had to work a little bit to tweak the hiring them on at a differential pay rate based on experience on the job standards. Currently, we also have an AmeriCorps grant, so there was some finagling around that to figure out how we pay them, because we as the university, Northern Arizona University, are the employer of these apprentices, which is a little different than you would see in other places. Yes, so we actually pay them. So there was a lot of figuring out to do, a lot of discussions with our state. And I think one of the things that we know from seeing this across different states is that it looks different in every space. There are some anchoring qualifications and some requirements for apprenticeship models, but each state kind of has a different flavor in the way that they're implementing this work. And so we just were very lucky that the way that the Arizona Department of Education designed this pathway really suited, at least the post-baccalaureate pathway really suited our residency program and enabled us to kind of transition over well. But I'm excited to be here with all of you and to hear these other ideas, because I'm making notes here.
Aren't we all? This is really good. Thank you for that. And I love that anybody who is listening, when they get to hear things that seem vastly different from what they expected. So now that I'm in a space where I get to work with so many apprenticeship programs that are either like, at the very beginning or not, if you've seen six, you've seen six. Like, really, there's so many different ways, because people like you are very scrappy. And there's just more than one way to kind of get to the goal. And I appreciate that. I'm actually going to stay with you for a little while. And if we could get the next slide, whenever we talk about the idea of a registered apprenticeship, a lot of times I hear people say, oh, we already have a clinical program. We have an apprenticeship. But that's not the same. It's not the same. And so understanding that whenever we talk about registered apprenticeships, or any degree that's really based on the job learning, we're shifting models and mindsets. So we're shifting the way that we sort of think of people who are already in the field. I think that we're elevating what they're bringing to the field in very different ways, because we recognize that they're not inexperienced, they're not new to the area, and you should actually maximize that. Like Victoria, you just talked about how 1,000 and then all the different numbers and of the hours, right, that they have. That means that you have the opportunity with somebody that's got 1,000 hours in front of kids right now, not in 4 years, right now, to make a better impact tomorrow in that child's education than they did yesterday. So whenever we talk about, again, that shifting of the model itself, could you tell us a little bit about the academic shift that you've already explored, just running into competency-based teacher apprenticeship? So tell us about the model shift, and then maybe the tools or the strategies that you found successful in navigating the change.
So I will say again, residencies are already pretty well positioned to do this work, because you're expecting residents to learn based on what the school districts expect them to learn. But in Arizona, every school district has a different teacher evaluation tool. We have a modified Danielson. We have a NIET. We have the InTask. So as a residency program, we were sort of like, which one do we use to evaluate the competencies of our residents? And for the last few years, we've kind of used some proxy for combination of that, which hasn't been the most effective way to go. So with the creation of the teacher apprenticeship, now we have one set of standards, which is really lovely. So we have the competencies based on the in-task standards, and then we have the on-the-job standards, which has really helped us orient around what should our residents know and be able to do every part of the journey along the way. And so I've been so grateful for this, and we can't wait to see the data. Craft Education is going to be providing the database for all of this. So we're excited to get onto that and start using it so we can reflect on how is each resident doing along the journey. We actually just had our first resident and supervising teacher or apprentice journey worker forum yesterday together. We brought them all together and evaluated how they're doing on these on the job standards. And it was so wonderful to see them look at how much they'd already done and very intentionally set goals around what they needed to achieve in coming months. So I will say that that has been a gift. The other piece that I think we do differently is that we have a set of competencies for the relational side of teaching that I think most programs maybe have implicitly, but we have it very explicitly. And so we evaluate our residents on that as well, and expect them to grow and learn alongside their journey worker in this process, because we know that the relational side of teaching is so critical for the rest of the work. So that's just another piece I'd throw out there.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate that in addition to like working within the model, what you didn't say is that standards or expectations are lowered. In fact, I think what makes your program so powerful is that you want it to be measured from every possible angle. Like nobody's leaving your program that's not really great in the classroom and graduating highly skilled. And I think that that's a beautiful thing for everybody to hear, whether they're on the webinar or they get this later, is that the shift doesn't have anything to do with your expectations, but how you help people meet them. That's what shifts. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Liz. And it's funny, the question that I want everybody to hear is so different because you're just such a wealth of knowledge. But I've also watched you work with your team to take a look at the model and understanding that you know, your apprentices can start so much earlier, receiving things that you typically wouldn't give a college student until maybe their junior or senior year. I watched you rework things to make things more competency based, and watched everybody get really excited about that. But despite how powerful that work is that I've seen, you have taken a completely different and very responsible approach in understanding that when we talk about the shifts from the traditional model to the apprenticeship model, that yes, there are the structural things, there are the opportunities and assessment that are different, but you also have never shied away from the fact that the apprentices themselves are not necessarily the traditional student that a College of Ed would see. And so I'm really interested to have you maybe share how you're shifting to serve a new population that your college hadn't really expressly served like so intentionally in the past. So what mindset shifts have really helped you support your apprentice population, given who they are whenever they start and the experiences that they're bringing into the college?
Thanks, Kim. That's a great question. And we did notice early on, because we're on our second cohort of registered apprentices, and we have about 100 of them now enrolled. We are a smaller preparation program in Colorado, but 100 of them is a lot to keep track of. And so what I would say is we always take care of our students at Colorado Mountain College, but I would say apprenticeship requires a very focused pathway of care. And where it's different from a traditional bachelor program is that students who want to go to college to be a teacher and they've planned to be in college for 4, 5, 6 years, then they'll finish and they'll find a teaching job, is a different mindset than an individual who has been asked by their employer to consider teaching as a credential and that they will be getting that credential while they're working full time. And there's so much pressure on an apprentice to do well, to get those competencies and to perform well, because they are being watched by their mentor or journey worker. We have field supervisors constantly out observing as well. They have their professors and instructors, and then of course they have their employers. So one of the things I noticed last year, and Joyce Milling is going to laugh because she's sitting here in the audience, is that I started characterizing the students, whether they're traditional, apprentice, alternative, with different attitudes and mindsets. And I came up with that apprentices are really like doomsday preppers. They're developing resilience in real time, and they will throw their hands up at some of the smallest barriers where other college students who are used to some of the barriers and pain of going to college, some of our apprentices, they just want to give up. So it is kind of working alongside them to say like, nope, this isn't a barrier. We're going to take care of this with you. And watching them build that resilience in real time. And But I want to say, like, because when you just brought up data, and we now have enough data to look at different things, but I'll tell you the most exciting data I looked at just recently. So we have two ways where we look at registration in college. So we have head count, which is just how many students are in your program. And then we have seat count, or registration count, which is how many courses they're taking in a semester. And so we made it very clear to apprentices, you must be a full-time student, which in college is at least 12 credits.
Yeah.
This is not a 5, 6, 7 year program. Your employer does not want you in college for 7 years. So we want you out in 4 years or less. If you have no college experience, 2.5 if you already have an associate's degree. So because we had traditional students predominantly before apprentices, they would take 6 credits a semester. And that's 15 weeks, and that is an 8-year bachelor degree. And so we had changed our programming around because 50% of the learning is on the job. Then they are in time with their instructors, and then they have some asynchronous time where they're working on their own. So now we have them registered for 12 credits. So we saw our seat count double. So our head count did increase with apprenticeship, but how many classes each of those students is now taking in a semester is twice as many. And that's where you will see, like, it gives me chills. And I should say, demographically, our apprentices are very diverse. Over half of them identify as people of color or individuals from historically disadvantaged backgrounds. We have quite a few women of color. And then we've seen more men in this pathway, or male students, than we ever have before. And I think that has a lot to do, and this is an elementary program, by the way, so I bring that up because it's so rare that you see male elementary teachers, and we have so many in the apprenticeship, but that's because they need to work full time to take care of their families. So going to college as a traditional student isn't always an option.
Yes, I got chills too, by the way. And I know just even in my own experience with working in a college that was designed for apprentices, right? There's a million reasons why college didn't work out at the beginning, and at some point we made them choose, right? But everything that you just said is so real because, as it turns out, whenever learning is highly relevant, whenever you give people a way to meet the goal, you can raise bars. So it's not surprising to me at all that you've seen like the time, the coursework, the course load increase because the urgency is there and the access is there, and your team's working so hard to actually change the way that they support and really value and honor those experiences. So that's no surprise to me at all. I'm actually going to invite Janae back to the conversation here because she was able to live this firsthand. So even while I was the dean of this university and she was one of my students, I also was working still full time in my school district because rural teacher shortage is real. And so I saw you work 40 hours a week in a classroom that was self-contained for students with severe profound needs. You were also helping me develop Educators Rising in Louisiana. You were all over I think you were also like the cheer coach. I don't actually know how you did it all. And you were a full-time student for 4 years, Janae. I watched you do it. So could you tell us a little bit in terms of thinking about that shift? Because I actually think you started in a traditional program, but do you have anything you could add in terms of the apprenticeship population and how critical it is that we really shift our mindset over how we serve people that are coming to us for access to the career that they really belong in?
Yeah, so my experience really just showed me how powerful it is to create spaces for different kinds of learners. I saw with traditional schooling, it doesn't always offer what everyone needs or what I needed in that moment, but apprenticeships do. For me, it was not just about the coursework, but it was about me learning hands-on, side by side with students while still being supported by my professors, my deans, and my mentors. And I also saw firsthand how mindsets had to shift, both mine and others. I think when people talk about the perfect teacher candidate, it's young people with like a lot of time and resources to just dedicate and give all. But like in my program, I sat beside parents that were like juggling multiple kids or, professionals shifting careers later on in life and classmates who are working long hours to make ends meet. So I do think apprenticeships created a way for all of us to belong, to be seen and to move forward at an affordable cost, all towards the same goal of being just great educators. So when I think of that mindset shift, it's all about moving away from the one size fits all education and embracing the diversity of experiences people bring into the classroom. And I think that's very important for a lot of students to see in their teachers is that diversity.
Yes. So excited. If I wasn't already in this work, I would like run to join. This is really good. Thank you all so much. We are going to shift a little bit and looking at the chat, especially earlier. So keep everything in the chat coming, but different ideas. There's definitely strategies there. Keep sharing them in the chat, please. We're going to move on. We're going to switch gears because we're going to talk about funding. Like Victoria talked a little bit about this, and then Liz talked about the fact that, you know, there was an unfunded sort of mandate. We're no stranger to that, no matter which state that you work in. And it's difficult to keep things moving whenever there's no money. Imagine that. So whenever we talk about braiding funding or whenever we unlock that, it's important to understand that whenever you really look at registering your apprenticeship program, it actually unlocks a different level of funding that we in, you know, traditional pre-K-12 education, we've never had access to because it wasn't our thing. So whether it was workforce dollars, so like WIOA, that's things like apprenticeship programs that are more traditional always knew about in workforce boards. But in education, we weren't used to really partnering that tightly with workforce boards. Or whenever we think about the ways that we leverage Pell or the way that different grants are leveraged. And it's so funny. I'm going to like code switch for a second. Like Victoria's a hustler. She will find a pot. And you have those pots in the same space. And I think that all teachers fundamentally understand how to braid funding. Like if you've worked at a school and you've had to sell popcorn, pickle, peanuts to get new desks, right? It's just another funding stream. So we are going to take a look at this because I really want our audience to be able to hear, because number one, there's no one size fits all for the way funding is accessed in your state. But it's also very promising that we're at a space now where the U.S. Department of Labor and nationally is actually really supportive of apprenticeship degrees. It's one of the spaces that money is being funded, even while we're seeing that other things are maybe being shifted in terms of funding or interest. This isn't one of those spaces. It's certainly a bright spot in terms of like moving the needle forward. So I'm going to turn back to our panelists, but I also wanted to say this in the chat. If you want any more ideas, because we do have some funding sources that are there, but we also have a link that you can click to be able to take a look to CRAFT's 2025 apprenticeship funding cheat sheet. But even for everything that's listed there, we're certainly helping people find other pods that literally you just didn't qualify before because you didn't have a registered apprenticeship program before. So definitely promise there, and don't let funding be the thing that deters the work. But over to you, Liz. What funding barriers, but mostly opportunities, have you navigated while launching and growing your registered apprenticeship program? And again, you're in a space that I think many of us are, if our states aren't yet, at a place where they in the timeline of apprenticeship where they're all out supporting all out funding. So can you just tell us a little bit about that? Like how did you ultimately fund scaling, but while keeping the cost down for students? Because bills have to get paid, right? So how did you do that? Challenges, anything that you care to share?
Absolutely. And can you go back to that prior slide to this one? Because I actually want to talk about this in terms of how you structure your program and then how you fund it. So as I said previously, apprentices are a little bit of a different type of student. And so, you know, when you have traditional students, they really need finish line funding to get through their student year at the end. Apprentices need start line funding. Like they are so worried about how am I going to pay for college? I don't even want to register for classes unless I know I can pay for this. And when you look at all those different pots of money, WIOA is really a finish line funding. Like they come in at the end when apprentices are working full time, they're the teacher of record in their classroom. Pell grants are that kind of onset start line funding. So helping students fill out a FAFSA is super important, helping them understand how they can leverage funding by, and in Colorado, if they can't fill out the federal student financial aid, we have one that's specific to Colorado, so they can leverage other financial aid to get started. When you look at Perkins funding and you think about as dual enrollment. We call it concurrent enrollment in Colorado. I would highly advise you to structure your program so that you can start early in the high schools. Colorado Mountain College, we call ourselves dual mission because we are not a community college, but we do offer certificates, 2-year and 4-year pathways. So we're all about stacking credentials. And that's how you can bring your students in earlier out of the high school. So we have a 12-credit certificate that's all education classes. It can all be paid for with concurrent enrollment. And aside from our 100 adult apprentices, we have 50 youth apprentices all over the Rocky Mountains who are working on this certificate, which will stack into our AA and our BA program. So they're big there. They already have college credit. It's all been paid for if they get a Pell Grant. I will say Colorado Mountain College is funded quite differently. Our taxpayers actually fund our institution much like a school district. So our tuition is a very low cost of attendance. You can get your full bachelor's degree, including tuition fees and books, for less than $30,000. So essentially a Pell Grant would pay for all of their college. But when we talk about braided funding, we tell our apprentices, don't stop at the Pell Grant, like keep applying, because there's other costs of attendance. There's rent, there's food, there's transportation, there's childcare. These are non-traditional students for the most part who have families. They're working full time. They have class in the late afternoons and evenings. And sometimes you just need to order out that night, feed your whole family. So we want to make sure that the funding is in place to support them all the way through. And so we're thinking about how you adjust the funding based on where they are in the process.
Thank you. That's a really strong setup. I'm going to move it straight to Victoria because, like, you know, where I braid with 3, right? She braids with 12. So if you could tell us a little bit just about that journey for you, the challenges, the opportunities, and just really your creative approach to how you bring different funding in to support every part about it.
So I don't think it's quite 12, but it is getting up there. We sort of acknowledge that 2 residencies and oh, my dog's gonna bark. They are a very resource intensive model. And because of that, you have to find multiple different funding sources. So we have something called the Arizona Teachers Academy in our state, which covers our residents' tuition, which is great. That's a huge boon for us. So our master's degree tuition for our apprentices is covered. The other things that we have worked out is that our districts pay us a certain amount per resident for the 2 years that they're in that apprenticeship model. We're trying to cover not only rainy day funds, living stipends, healthcare, but also their induction support in the second year, because in the first year they have a journey worker. In the second year, they have a full release induction mentor. So we're also working to cover that. So we also have multiple different foundations that help fund us. We have some federal funding. And like I said, we have that state funding, but I've seen other states explicitly fund residencies and apprenticeships. So I feel like that's another pathway, is that you get state funding, foundation funding, district funding, federal funding, and to kind of braid them all together helps you feel more sustainable.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I'm still learning too, and I'm never gonna stop being amazed with your magic that you work. And it's just real talk. And it brings us actually to our next question. And I'm also going to try to weave this into a question that was asked in the chat. All right. So all my teacher skills on full display to try to braid those thoughts together. Whenever we talk about stakeholder relationships and apprenticeship, it's a game changer, and it is very different than the way that we have done things traditionally, whether it's in higher ed or at a district level. And so you just talked about all those different partnerships that you have alone just for the funding stream, but the louder message is telling me just how many partners you have. And so I'm going to connect this to a question that Mitzi, I think she's from Hawaii, that she had in the chat. She was also asking, how do you get others to sign standards of apprenticeship, because she's in a position where she's not part of Hawaii Department of Ed. Okay, so here's the magic. I'm going to ask this next question. You can't do any of this alone, and there's just no one person could ever do any of the pieces that you need. So you would get people to sign on through partnerships. You get a program to thrive through partnerships. You get more funding stream through partnerships, but it's not just lip service. you need those partners. You cannot have an apprenticeship degree. You can't have an apprenticeship program for teachers if you don't have them at the table actively working. So at the end of the day, you're trying to very conscientiously prepare teachers for the workforce who's right there telling you what's working and what's not, because they need a highly skilled teacher yesterday, right? So I'm going to turn that over. And I think it's a great place to kind of sail us into the conclusion of our webinar. And I'll ask Liz and Victoria, which partners do you think have been most critical in your work and like building and sustaining that? Because it's not a one and done. It's not a hello, let's pose for the picture. Cheese. No, that's your partner, right? And you need them to go and get signatures, and you need them to help you sustain, and you need them to help you keep people excited, because the work gets hard like anything else. So Liz and then Victoria, can you just tell us a little bit more about those relationships that you have? I think that would be really beneficial for everybody that's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes at the onset when programs, especially the IHE, is thinking about engaging in registered teacher apprenticeships, sometimes they say they think they want to do all of it. And I would say, and I know institutions of higher ed do a lot in supporting students' communities, especially if you're more of a regional institution that's highly embedded in your communities. Yeah. But I am of the mindset where you really should stay in your lane and do what you do best, which is preparing teachers. If you're not used to registering with the Department of Labor, that's where your intermediary partners or a program sponsor comes in who has experience in that work. You know, your state agencies or your oversight agencies in Colorado, our Department of Ed and our Department of Labor started working together, which they had never done before. And watching them spend 2 years trying to speak each other's love languages is quite interesting, because they don't say things the same way, but they really had to come together as state agencies to make this work. So then you have your employer partners, your school districts, right? And they aren't used to this at all. And many of them, if they're rural, do not have any resources to lift this. So a lot of times it falls on the university and the program sponsor, and sometimes the state agency. But you have to be very clear of what everybody is doing. You have to meet often, more than you think. Like our steering committee, we met every single week for 2 years. Like I love all those people. I didn't know them before, and now we're all like super tight, and you know, we're continue to work together even though our grant has concluded. And so you have to think of it that way. Like you just put it on your calendar every week. Your steering committee is coming together and going through the program. So yeah, everybody's important and has a role to play.
So important. And you touched on like this idea of staying in your lane, because that's where you're an expert. But I can't tell you how much I have learned now that I've been like working so closely with workforce boards. I will say this, full stop. I've never met more passionate people committed to helping adults help their own circumstances. Like, where has workforce board been my whole life? Like, we're doing the same work. So thank you so much for saying that. I'm not surprised that you're still besties with that steering committee, because whenever you have work like this, it's powerful and it's forever. Victoria, could you share?
Sure. I love the idea of the steering committee, Liz. I might borrow that. We've been having too many different meetings, so I like the idea of like bringing everyone together in one meeting. I will say that we're very grateful to the state, Arizona Department of Ed, for spearheading this particular initiative. So we don't have to be the one registering them. They are the sponsor, and so we kind of outsource all of that work to them. I will also say that our district partners have been really important. So forming connections with them. Every district that we partner with has a point person that helps oversee this work within the district. And then underneath them, of course, are the journey workers. And so bringing them together 7+ times a year to meet with them, to create a community of practice within our program so that we constantly get hands-on, a better sense of what's going on in their classrooms with our apprentices has been absolutely critical. I will also say, like, forming relationships with other state officials, with the foundations that are local to your state, so you can tell your story, share data, explain how things have happened, has been really, really important to us as well as local media who can share your story and help you recruit. And then finally, I want to say that the most important stakeholders that we see in this whole experience, aside from the residents or apprentices who are very important, are the students. that are being served in the classroom. And we feel that it's absolutely critical to listen to them and hear their voices. So we actually do interviews with our K-8 students in our residents or apprentices classrooms at the end of the year. And we just published a paper in the Journal of Teacher Education on this work. And one of the findings, the takeaways from all of this is that registered teacher apprenticeships and residencies are so valuable to these students who now have twice the amount of education that they would normally have. They said, we're really lucky because we have our 2 teachers. We're getting twice the amount of knowledge in a year as an average kid. And they talked a lot about the relationships that they form with these significant adults in their lives over the course of that year and how much that improves their learning experience. And so I will just say that really helping the apprentices to learn how to connect with these kiddos in their classrooms is a huge gift to everyone.
Thank you so much. And gosh, the idea that it's talk about putting your money where your mouth is proverbially, that students are so much an actual stakeholder. Like you want to hear them and their voice is just as honored as anyone else in this whole ecosystem. So what I'm going to ask now, this is going to be a quick one, guys, but I like it. You can handle it. You're educators. If you could tell just one piece of advice, like a quick piece of advice, to anybody who's listening, what would you say? And let's start maybe Victoria, Liz, and Janae.
I would say think outside the box. There's always a way forward to get this work done. Connect with as many people as you can in your field, and the relationships are really where the magic happens.
Wonderful.
I would agree with Victoria, and then I would recommend that you say yes to all of the opportunities you have to learn. And like Kim said earlier, if you've been working in education a long time, start going to workforce conferences because you'll learn the other side of this very quickly. And in my opinion, they're way more fun than education conferences. So say yes to all the opportunities to learn as much as you can.
Thank you. And Janae?
So I have 2 pieces of advice. The first one would be for anyone who's looking into launching an apprenticeship program is to just don't forget the human side of things. At the core of these programs are people balancing lives, families, responsibilities while pursuing these paths. So just making sure your systems are flexible, the supports are responsive, and the programs are welcoming. So those who don't fit the traditional mold feel welcomed. And also to anyone who's thinking about joining a apprenticeship program or trying to go through one is to do it. I am living proof that it works. And I'm a huge, huge believer in learning by doing. And with this program, it's great. And the hands-on is just being able to be hands-on is just it's great.
Thank you so much. That's my student. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, panelists. Mitzi, I want to personally invite you to please reach out because your question is pretty nuanced, and I want to make sure that we could support you with the answer. And I know that there is an answer. But for everybody else, I hope that you learned so much. Seriously, watch the work of Liz and Victoria because it's brilliant, and I am always taking notes. And before you go, everybody, we just love feedback. So a survey is going to pop up if you don't mind taking a minute and filling that out. And honestly, just thank you. You could have been anywhere and you attended to choose today, or you chose to watch this afterwards. So we're all in the work together. You're absolutely not alone. Obviously, you're part of an amazing network and an ecosystem of moving the needle and doing great things for kids, for teachers, and I think for the country. So thank you all again and enjoy the rest of your day and reach out if we could help in any way.